Crime, Punishment and Justice, an Anarchist Perspective, Dicky Dredd. And this is the first part. In fact, it's the sort of preface part, not the first chapter, on a new book which I've just published called Crime, Punishment and Justice, an Anarchist Perspective. And it's one of our books through the Oakist Press, which is an anarchist commons publishing agency. So you can now get hold of it just by going on to my website, and I'll put links, etc., into the description when I put this on YouTube. So let's get going with acknowledgements. So for proofreading, Brian, John Millington and Jen Todd, both from Oakist Press. For the cover art, Nigel Adams. For formatting to print, Paul Garbutt, also at Oakist Press. For inspiration, feedback and engaging debates, and this is in no particular order, Nigel Adams, Erica Rose, Drew Shotness, Robin Sherwood, Martin and many other folk that have heard me harping on about these issues in pubs, festivals and sites elsewhere. Oh, and AI comes out with some utter bollocks on these subjects most of the time, but not bad for proofreading and supplying some of the references that I've used. Dedication. This book is dedicated to my son, Marcus. Despite being on the wrong, inverted commas, side of our ridiculous drug laws and having spent several years of his life in a cage, Marcus has now made something special of his life and is bringing up some wonderful children. Love you, mate. Okay, introduction to the author. I always hate this bit, but you got to do it, ain't you? So, Dicky Dredd, that's me, is no stranger to living the ideas he writes about. Under his academic name, Richard Leach, he published textbooks in physics and measurement theory. He often jokes that the only things he ever measured with true precision were the joint skins and the speaker distances at late night raves. A professor of physics by trade, he admits he chose measurement theory because the rest of his life was too unpredictable to calibrate. What he has measured most carefully, though, is freedom, in theory and in practice. From spinning ska and reggae in muddy festival fields to wiring up solar panels on caravans held together with gaffer tape, he has lived the experiments in autonomy, solidarity and survival that run through Practical Anarchy, that was a previous book, and my later books. His festival prowess once stretched to keeping a sound system going for 3 days straight, though he admits the mystical stamina was more down to dodgy instant coffee than cosmic alignment, maybe something else. Friends still tell stories of him DJing in the rain while trying to hold up a tarp with one hand and a spliff with the other. His work spans how-to guides for New Age travellers, cultural histories of resistance, raw autobiographical writing on trauma and recovery, and now a sweeping account of why money, the state and religion hold us back from freer ways of living. Has also been accused of being too kind for an anarchist, sort would stop mid-rant about capitalism to offer you stew and a blanket. Meditation and philosophy, especially time spent at New Buddha Way with Professor Jeff Hunt, shaped his thinking alongside years of field work, squats, protest camps and improvised kitchens, where he learnt that lentils can in fact be stretched into 3 meals if you're inventive enough. His writing cuts across science, politics and lived experience, always fuelled by baselines, bonfires and the sort of gallows humour that keeps communities going when the police turn up to shut the party down. Dicky Dredd's mission is to dig beneath the systems we take for granted, to show that alternatives are not utopias but lived possibilities. This, together with his earlier book Practical Anarchy, constitute his call to take those glimpses of another world seriously and to turn them into reality. He still insists that laughter, bad jokes and occasional chaos are essential tools in any revolution. After all, if you can't dance, or at least laugh at your mate falling over a gyro, it probably isn't his kind of anarchy. Preface. This is not a book about being nice. It is a book about what we do when niceness fails. When people hurt each other, take things that aren't theirs, cross lines, lose control, or simply make a mess of being human. It's about what happens after the slogans, beyond the outrage and after the comforting lie that there is a system somewhere keeping everything under control. Because there isn't. We are told there is, of course. We are told that police keep us safe, prisons deliver justice, Courts provide closure and punishment makes society behave itself. We are told this so often and with such confidence that questioning it can feel like questioning gravity. Yet most of us already know, in our bones, that something is wrong. Harm keeps happening. Violence repeats. Prisons fill up. Police budgets expand. Surveillance multiplies. And still the same problems trudge on, wearing slightly different uniforms. This book starts from a simple, awkward observation. If the system worked, it wouldn't need to keep getting bigger. The chapters that follow dismantle the myths that prop up punishment, but avoid utopian fantasies or purity politics with evidence, history, and an unflattering look at how authority actually behaves when left alone with power. I trace how justice was professionalised, bureaucratised and weaponised, how care was replaced with control, and how public order became shorthand for obedience rather than safety. I ask why we are so attached to cages, even when they demonstrably fail at everything they claim to do. Along the way, I'll make an unfashionable suggestion that justice might have something to do with repair. This is where readers sometimes get nervous. Repair sounds soft. Empathy gives the impression of indulgence. Responsibility without punishment seems suspiciously like letting people get away with it. But this book does not argue for indulgence. It argues for adulthood. It insists that responding to harm by outsourcing responsibility to institutions is not strength but avoidance, a refusal to do the harder work of living together without someone else holding the stick. If that sounds demanding, it is. Freedom always is. Anarchism, as it appears here, is not a lifestyle aesthetic or a historical reenactment society for people who really like bucking quotes. The book will pose practical questions. How do humans organise safely? Accountability and care without threatening each other into submission? What replaces policing when we stop pretending policing works? What replaces punishment when we stop confusing suffering with justice? The answer, frustratingly, is not one thing alone. There's no replacement machine you can wheel in once the old one breaks. What exists instead are practices, restorative, transformative, communal, that treat harm as a social rupture rather than a moral stain. They are slower. They are messier. They involve conversations nobody wants to have and responsibilities nobody can dodge. They fail sometimes. They fail openly, which is precisely why they are more honest than systems that fail quietly behind walls and paperwork. This book does not pretend that a world without rulers will be tidy. Someone will still nick your bike. Someone will still shout at a meeting. Someone will still drink too much, lash out or disappear when accountability is mentioned. The difference is not that harm vanishes, but that it stops being someone else's problem. The question shifts from who should be punished to what needs fixing and who is responsible for fixing it. Those questions are deeply inconvenient. They also happen to be the only ones that have ever led anywhere useful. The later chapters explore how justice without rulers makes safety without a police force or prisons possible, not just optimism, but through design. I look at care networks instead of control systems, education instead of enforcement, and social conditions instead of deterrence. I show why safety is something people learn rather than something imposed, and why societies organised around fear inevitably become more violent, not less. If this all sounds suspiciously reasonable, don't worry, it gets uncomfortable too. There are limits, there are failures, there are harms that cannot be neatly repaired. This book does not offer salvation, it offers responsibility. It insists that imperfection is not an argument for cages, and that difficulty is not a justification for violence administered in our name. And yes, there is humour here, not because the subject is light, but because taking authority seriously is one of the oldest jokes in history. A sense of humour is often the first casualty of power, and the last refuge of those who have had enough of being managed. If we cannot laugh at the absurdity of a system that cages people to teach them self-control, we're probably already in trouble. You do not need to agree with everything that follows. You do not need to call yourself an anarchist. You do not need to like the author very much. You only need to sit with the questions long enough to notice how strange our current answers are. If I nicked your bike, how would you want me to fix it? If the honest answer has nothing to do with a courtroom, a sentence, or a cell door, then you already understand more about justice than most institutions ever have. The rest of this book is an attempt to take that understanding seriously, without romance, without fear, without pretending that growing up as a society would be easy. It won't be. But neither is living in a world where the solution to every problem is a bigger stick, a higher wall, and a longer list of people we've decided not to care about. Welcome to the awkward part. Okay, next up, and it's going to be a little while now because I need to finish the other books, so you're going to have to be a bit patient. But we're going to go on to chapter 1, which is Born Evil, the Myth of Human Nature and Control.